evening everybody. I hope you are all well. Now, whether you're watching me now or if you're watching me a little bit later on, as I always say, give me a thumbs up and do pop me a note in the comments so I know you were present. So tonight's project is going to be a bead embroidery bat. Now, there is actually a downloadable stroke printable PDF of the bat outline that I roughly sketched. It's not perfect, but it's really workable for using as a template. And if you print it off, I've also done a couple of other sizes on there as well. Now, if you look at the top of this live, there's a link to that you can download as well, and there's also a list of all of the materials that you require. You may have some already, you can vary it, it's just I know people do like a little bit of guidance as to what you can use. Now, this was the first one that I did, but I liked it, but I didn't like the fact that the wings weren't as distinct. So this is the one that you've got a template for, which I'm really quite happy with the outline. And like I say, you can alter it as you wish. So that's what we're going to base it on today. So we're stitching onto a bead embroidery foundation. So if you're new to this, you can buy all of these materials in the Facebook group. This is the printable. It's a bit rustic. I like to do mine on graph paper because that way you can actually make sure that it's even either side. So cut yourself a little bit of the bead embroidery foundation, cut out whichever template you want, and then just draw around it with a pen or a pencil. Now, top tip is, you see where these lines are here, that's also important that you incorporate those in, because that will give you the angle with which to stitch your beads. And we're going a bit closer in a moment, but basically what I've done is I've marked, so I put that on there, mark those. Where the curve is on 1 and 2 is where you line it up. So I got a ruler from the dot to the end of the tip of the wing and second, and that will give you a good angle with which to work from. Okay, so that's number one. Obviously you might want to do your own design, that's entirely up to you. The next thing we're going to need is one of these sew on cabochons. Now, I've got them in green, in blue, they're two-tone, and it doesn't really show up that well. This one's blue and purple. This one's green and dark, light green, dark green. So they've got 2 holes at the back. Now, I've just marked roughly where I want the tip of this one to be. I'm going to lay that on here and just make sure I get it how I want it. And I'm just going to actually put a pen mark on there, because what it will help is me positioning the needle. I've got a size 10 beading needle. I've cut over 1 meter of black nymo, and then I've put a knot at the bottom as well. The first thing we do is stitch this on. I'm going to go in where the first hole is, push the needle through that hole. So I'm just going down the other side. Also notice how I've curved around the beading foundation, which makes it a lot easier. I'm just going to reinforce that, go back round again. Now, bear in mind that you may use different beads, crystals, etc., and you may position your crystal in a different place. So bear in mind that you will have to adapt your piece to suit, but I'm hoping I'm going to give you confidence to do it in your own style. So we're just going through the bottom hole, trying to. Oh, this is the only thing in going too close in, is I go off camera, so it might be worth me zooming out a little bit. One of the trickiest things about this cabochon here is making sure that you actually get it central. You'll actually outline this sew on cabochon with some 1.5 by 2.5 millimeter crystal rondelles. Bring your needle out the side, about 1 millimeter from the side. Use the tip of your needle to pop on 4 of the crystals. If you want to, you can do it quicker, you can add more, but just bear in mind that sometimes it might be a little bit slack if you use too many all at once. Take a nosedive down after that 4th one. Turn it over, go into the previous hole. That brings you out at the bottom of that cluster of 4. Go back up through all of those beads. So I'm just nosediving down after the 4th bead, back stitching into the previous hole. Now what I would suggest, I'm not going to do it now, I'll just do a little bit as my needle's up, is to reinforce and push your needle all the way around so that it helps those to lie flat. Isn't that pretty? And then I'm going to do a second row of those crystal rondelles around it. Now these crystal rondelles, we also use the crystal rondelles to stitch down these bits here. It just gives it a bit of an accent. We'd go all the way around that. Now it's up to you what kind of order. What I would suggest you do next, entirely up to you, but just like I say, a suggestion, is you go and outline our bat, and do that in the normal way that you would do it, either 4 to 6. Now top tip is when you are going around corners is use 2 to 3 beads, because otherwise you end up having to put half hitch stitch across them because you've distorted the curve. So we're back stitching again. Right, so I'm doing 3 at a time. Now in a little while we are going to switch to my other piece where I will actually do hopefully 1/2. I'm going to switch to the bottom. Now, if you ever need to get from A to B, I always try and hook it through some of the thread bars at the back. Now, like I say, this really is not pretty at all at the back, is it? But nobody's going to see it. What I did was I stitched a single seed bead across the bottom. And then we will start stitching up through the curve. So when you come back the other side, you just meet that down there. All right, so you would have done your outline. Here's one I prepared earlier. Okay, we'll stitch some bugle beads around. These are Toho bugle beads, so I'm adding 2 at a time. Now, got to be honest with you, with your piece, because it might be slightly different to mine, is you may have to add some seed beads in. I would suggest that you lay these around your piece before you stitch them, just so that you've got an idea as to whether or not they all fit. The other thing is, when you've got these little packs of bugle beads, some of them you can get, some of them are slightly smaller than others, which to be honest is actually really useful for bead embroidery. Right, and I'm just going to come up through the middle of that, and again you can reinforce around all of that. Let's just recap, shall we? Now, we've drawn the outline, so you need to print off your printable, and with a pen or a pencil draw around the foundation. Make sure you put in the lines as well, because that will help in a moment. And we've stitched on your sew on cabochon. We've stitched on, I definitely need to score that down, we've stitched on the 1.5mm crystal rondelles, and then we've put the bugle beads around it, and we've got a pretend outline. Okay, so we can now switch over to this one. This is with the clear cabochon, and this is what we're going to do. We should hopefully have time to do one of this other side. So just to mention, at the bottom here, I've just filled that little gap in with crystal rondelles. Okay, and I need to thread another needle. How many of you are going to give this a go? And is it giving you some inspiration to maybe try something else. So this is another way of doing the knotting. Got my tail end there, wrap it round your needle, pinch the bit that you've wrapped round and drag it all the way down. My suggestion to you would be to start one of these so that you've actually got the right angle. Doing it in one whole stitch actually makes it flow a little better in a straight line. I've just done one line and I'm going all the way up just to reinforce that. If we turn this on its side, what I've got here, although it does differ on each one, is 3 bugle beads and a seed bead. But you will have to vary yours accordingly. I'd reinforce then come out about 1 millimetre away. And this just gets a little bit wider, so I'm going to copy what we've got on the other side, but I might have to alter it slightly. There we go. So on this one I've got a seed bead, a bugle, seed bead and bugle. And what's next? Right, seed bead, bugle, seed bead, bugle. And what you want to avoid doing is actually overfilling, because if you overfill, what actually happens is you distort the shape. And so we've got one of those, and I've got a little crystal. That's slightly coming out of kilter, so I mentioned about a half hitch. What you can do is put a stitch over it just to pull it out a little bit. Doing 1 seed bead, 2 bugles, and then what's the next one? 1 seed bead, 1 bugle, 1 bugle bead. You might find that you need to add more one side than the other. That's okay. Now what I've done on the other side is, you see there's a bit of a gap there. I've actually pulled it in, so I'm going to put a stitch underneath. Can you see that? At the front, and then I'm going to stitch in to pull it in, and that'll just marry up the other side as well. Now this bit at the top, we've got a gap at the top. On this one I've got a row of bugle beads, and then a row of crystals. Well, you might have to improvise as to what works. Now I am going to do a half hitch over these just to secure them in place. Okay, now I would probably either try and pop some size 15s in that gap there, pull that one in. There you go. So to finish off, what I would do is cut from the back. Now if you're going to do brick stitch, I would push your needle through to the front and cut at the back. Okay, now brick stitch, for those of you that have not done it before, is this edge in here, and you can find that on my YouTube channel, brick stitch edging. And what I would be inclined to do is to stitch the backing on at the same time as well. So if you're doing brick stitch, you need a little bit of foundation to pick up when you're doing your brick stitch. You don't want too much. The reason why I'd cut from the back is it's so easy to cut through your work, even when you're cutting from the back. And if you're not feeling very confident about it, what I'd suggest you do is have another needle and thread with a knot on the bottom at the ready, so that if any of the beads do come undone, you can just quickly go in and retrieve it. Now you're going to need to cut it down a bit more than that, but you will need a smallish amount. What you might also want to do as well is colour in the foundation on the edge. Just be careful if you are doing any colouring in with your Sharpie pens, is I've made the mistake in the past of colouring in and it colours your seed beads and it doesn't look very nice at all. So the other option as well is to colour in your beading foundation before you even start. Now there we go. So just a quick recap is we started with the sew on, then we did 2 layers of the small crystals, a layer round of the bugle beads, then we did the outline, then we made sure that you'd got the drawn in sort of veins, so to speak, on the bat, and then worked from that. That gives you your angle points, because otherwise it can lead you a little bit adrift. So let's just have a quick look. So that was the green one, and that is with the metallic iris beads, this one, and those are the blue and green. So that's the colour I've used on that one, and I've used silver lined black diamond on that one, and this one I've silver lined. This one I've used metallic blue iris. Can you see this needs colouring in? I need some blue Sharpie pens. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your company, and do make sure that you please share your makes in the Beaders group. Beaders Have Beads by Rich Hill. Take care everybody. Speak to you soon. Bye.